Thank you for joining for another episode of the TechSpective Podcast. I have with me Rob Harrison. So, Rob, if you want to give a little bit of background on yourself, and we'll get into it.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony, for having me today. Looking forward to the discussion. Rob Harrison, SVP of Product Management here at Sophos. I run our MDR business and emerging technology. So things that are like our identity threat detection response, exposure management, advisory services, areas that are very complementary to our overall security operations approach. I've been at Sophos about 4 years now. I was previously CPO at a company called Capsulate, which was acquired by Sophos, focused on cloud and Linux workload protection, based out of New York, which was a really good, fun journey. Met some great people. And Sophos has been a whirlwind since, very high growth in the MDR space, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, and it's been a lot of fun. Prior to that, I was at a company called BA Systems, big defense company, and before that, a smaller UK consultancy in national security and technology called Detica. So my background's all about technology, innovation, and solving some of the problems that make a difference to society, whether that be now in cybersecurity and previously working in anti-financial crime as well.
Okay. I've been doing this for a long time, so I'm personally very familiar with Sophos, and I've done stuff with them in the past. You guys recently published, you have the annual state of ransomware report, and I in a former life, I was at Cyber Reason, and we had a big focus on ransomware, and so we did our own. I actually wrote 3 different annual ransomware reports at Cyber Reason. But it's been a few years, and so on the one hand, I'm like, I don't think ransomware's gone anywhere, but on the other hand, I feel like it's been kind of buried by the AI debate. We don't talk about it as much, but I don't think that means that the threat went away. So let's just start with kind of what are some of the key insights or interesting findings from your perspective in the report?
It's a very good point. So it's massively prevalent still, especially in all sizes of customers. But Sophos works enterprise, mid-market, SMB, but the mid-market and SMB, they really suffer. And I think there's a few positives and negatives. So one, obviously, ransomware is awful. We all hate it as a society. It affects all kinds of different things, whether it's healthcare and stopping operations happening, or like shutting down schools, or whatever. It's it's not acceptable. We want to do everything we can to reduce it. The negatives are, we're making, as an industry, some improvements in terms of stopping ransomware happening completely in terms of certain organizations. However, the actual real positives are what is happening when an organization is suffering a ransomware incident. How are they dealing with it? What's the cost of how much are they actually paying out? What's the speed to recover their organization, get operational again? So the top level, we might see that it's still highly prevalent in the industry, and that's unfortunate. But when you actually dig into it, we see that organizations are becoming better equipped to deal with the situation, to get to their data, to get it restored. And if they need to, and hopefully they don't, but they do still sometimes, if they need to negotiate out of the situation, they're paying less in general than was demanded than in previous years. So It's really, really interesting to just see how the dynamics are changing at all different levels.
Yeah, but there are still the tragic cases. There was the one a few years back with the 150-year-old college in Illinois, I think it was, that shut down, and then just recently there was the trucking company, logistics company in the UK, I think, that shut down. That as a result of a ransomware attack. So it's great that most are better equipped and maybe more resilient to be able to handle these things, but there are still those tragic cases. It's funny, I just sort of merging the AI thing with the ransomware thing. I just saw someone, I don't remember who, so I can't give him credit. I just saw someone share a thing on social media yesterday. There was a little joke comic about, I asked AI to create to code me something that would generate 100 million in revenue, and it gave me a ransomware exploit.
God, yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully people don't do that. But yes, it's a real world example. Yeah.
Like, well, I mean, if you're trying to start from nothing and get to $100 million in revenue, that might be one of the faster ways.
Yeah, faster ways to end it as well. But I think like the fundamental problem still, like that we see, is like people are still just getting like the basics, like missing the basics. They're getting vulnerabilities they're not aware of exploited, and that can be a bit frustrating, especially when there's so many good technologies and solutions out there. And I think that's probably, again, where we'll discuss a little bit more today, I'm sure, like where Sophos's strategy is making sure that we're moving in that direction, more kind of a proactive approach to educate customers and partners about getting ahead of this, like more proactively, like more kind of preemptive solutions about risk reduction. And, that's better for everybody, better for the customer, the partner, better for the cost of like servicing customers. It's better for so many different reasons.
For sure. So one of the things, like, and I know you've talked about this, Sophos has talked about this, but the idea of, managed detection and response, having MDR providers being able to help underserved or organizations that lack the resources, which I guess, it just to kind of start that part of the conversation, I feel like is so much more of the market than people, I think, realize. Like you think of the big companies or whatever, it's like I don't know, the General Motors, the American Airlines, the whoever. Like, yes, they're large, massive corporations. They've got entire they've got IT teams that dwarf some companies, but most of the companies out there aren't that. Most of the companies in the world are smaller organizations. And I definitely have some thoughts, but I want to start by letting you kind of talk about like how do you see the logic behind should a company build in-house, manage, and put the tools in place and manage it themselves versus working, partnering with an MDR?
Yeah. I mean, this is a topic that's very close to my heart. So a few things. There's a statistic that we've been using at Sophos quite a lot over the last few months that really puts things in perspective about security expertise globally. And I'll just use it, and a few of you might have heard it before, but there's 359 million organizations on the planet. And most of those will be what we'd consider, mid-market or SMB, and they're all like critical to society, and we interact with them every day. And there's about 32,000 security leaders, CISOs. So if you think about that, that's 0.009% of organizations even have access to somebody whose job is full-time to like protect the organization and to think about their investments. So that's one way of thinking about just how underserved these organizations are. But then there's a more fundamental way of thinking about it. It's like, what is their mission? What is the mission of a regional school, healthcare, a commercial organization that may be 100 or 200 people? Their mission is not security. Their mission is, serving their customers for whatever they created their business or organization. And when you get in that mindset, you have to kind of like imagine that you're doing that day to day. And they're kind of like, security is very much like a worry, but they don't understand all the types of threats. They don't understand all the types of technologies. They don't have the budget and the investment to recruit and retain the talent. And again, back to that, nor should they. They should work with security vendors whose mission is security. And why is that? Because companies like Sophos work day in, day out with thousands of people, like in terms of employees, and then tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers. So we get to see things like all the different trends of threats. We get to research all the types of threats. We get to build technology specifically designed to, either contain or do detection and response. And then you come to the MDR angle, and that's just the next layer on that journey from my perspective. It's like that small organization, that mid-market organization, or even the enterprise that's focused on, running whatever they're doing. They should really think about outsourcing and partnering with a vendor that is their mission, because then
Right.
you can build a trusted relationship, you can focus on your mission, and you can let the organization that's servicing multiple customers really deliver on your security needs. And we can discuss more about what that could look like. Is it the turnkey approach? Is it the partnership? But MDR can mean a lot of different things, but it's definitely, in my view, the right way to think about how to put security in the hands of people that live and breathe it every day.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely with you. I mean, like my thoughts are, so I was recently doing some projects around the house, and my wife and I always end up in a discussion. We'll call it a discussion, not a debate, about should we just hire someone to do that. I'm always in favor of just hiring the professional to do that, because I'm like, okay, I want the results to be professional. Like, can I do it with the right number of YouTube videos? Sure. I mean, I'm sure I can manage it. But I don't think that the outcome will be as good as what I want. And then when we look at the cost benefit analysis and we say, okay, but I can do it cheaper. It's like, well, can I? Because a lot of times doing it yourself requires buying the right tools, which means that yes, in theory, if I have the tools, I can do it cheaper. But if I have to go out and buy a $300, planer or whatever, or a router or whatever it is I need to finish the project, it's like, okay, well, now you just upset the cost benefit analysis by a large margin. And so kind of pulling it back to your point about a security, a managed detection and response provider, because they're doing that for a living. They're doing that all day, every day. They're doing it for multiple clients. They have that visibility already. They already have the expertise, so that investment is being spread across multiple organizations, as opposed to me as an organization trying to make all of those investments myself. And once upon a time, when I was at Alert Logic, we wrote the MDR manifesto, and at the time, I remember it was I'm going to give credit to Jack Danahy. He came up with this sort of analogy of like medical, like a doctor. It's like, well, organizations. Typically, I'm not aware of any that do. Organizations don't decide that they're going to build healthcare internally. They don't hire their own doctors. They don't. And it's like, well, no, you outsource that. There are experts. There are people who do that for a living, and you go see them. And it's like, okay, well, why then do organizations say, okay, well, but security, we're going to try to do that ourselves. Like healthcare, we're going to outsource that. Landscaping for the building, we're going to outsource that. We're going to hire people to come and do the mow the lawn and trim the bushes. We're going to hire people to come in and empty the trash cans and vacuum the floors. We're going to outsource all of these things, but security, we think we can manage that ourselves.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when you put it like that. I mean, even back to your housing or do it yourself a home improvement analogy, that's one job you're talking about there. You could be doing the electric, you need a certification, you could be doing the plumbing and causing leaks. So you can think about it as loads of different skills in MDR. It's not just solving one threat. You're constantly learning and evolving and teaching, and you've got analysts with different skill levels, and you're building and scaling the organization. So it's a crazy when you think about it, and you think about an organization thinking they can solve it, and they can recruit the right talent, and they can choose the right technology, and they can get everybody to the same level of delivering the right outcomes. And I think we're still at a maturity level in the industry where a lot of people are understanding the level of risk to their business or organization. They're still understanding the level of cost it takes to deliver something that genuinely does reduce their risk 24/7 versus when everybody's in the office. And also, I think, what could those people be doing otherwise? Even if you've recruited the people, they could be enabling your business versus like focusing on security. They could be driving you forward in terms of scalability or enabling people to do their jobs in a more efficient manner from an IT perspective. So it's pretty odd when you think about it like that. But I would say, given what we can see, like I'm sure you've seen it as well in your past career, it's like the adoption of MDR is one example now of this industry going in the right direction and organizations understanding the value of it. The growth has been double digit for a number of years now. The number of vendors has increased dramatically, and you've got SMBs, mid-market enterprises in many different regions, in many different industries in the world, like really going in that direction and working out that they can justify what could be perceived as a significant cost increase from a product, because there's obviously humans and more innovation in AI in that space. But yeah, I think it's all moving in the right direction. Is it moving quickly enough? Probably not, but that's the usual kind of adoption curve of technology and solutions.
Well, and also I am not a financial guy, but you also, by shifting things, you move things from capital expenses to operational expenses. It's like and where it's like it's a lot easier to enter into an agreement with an MDR, and like if you want to change, you can switch MDRs. You can do other things. Like when you hire employees, and sorry, I'm not arguing for getting rid of everyone's employees or whatever, but I mean but it's a big lift, and it's not cheap. I've made similar arguments in the past when Microsoft first introduced the concept of I can't even think of what they called it originally, but just the Office 365 kind of concept or whatever, and saying, okay, well, yes, I could buy the licenses, I could set up an Exchange server, I could set up a SharePoint server, I could set up an Intune server, I can do all of those things in house, but now I've got to buy all the servers and I've got to buy all the licenses and I've got to hire the expertise to manage all of those things, or I can just pay like $25 a month to Microsoft and all the servers are managed on the back end and I don't have to worry about it. I just use the products. This is a similar sort of argument to me of like, yes, I can do all of these things in-house, or I can just have experts manage it for me.
That's right. And yeah, as technology changes, don't need to worry about that. As the solution changes, you don't need to worry about it. And as threats evolve,
like Microsoft is responsible for up making sure that the Exchange server is updated and has all the patching. It's like that's not my problem at that point. I'm just
no, and same for Sophos in this scenario. Yeah, we're making sure that we're staying on top of the latest threats, that we're building the team, that we're scaling, and that's actually been a really important part of this journey over the last few years. Is how do you demonstrate value? Because it's easy to think about, okay, I've got a service, I'm now protected. If there's a more complicated threat, there's people that will be doing the detection response, they'll be shutting it down and helping me remediate. However, how do you demonstrate value if there isn't an incident, which you hope there isn't anyway? So yeah, we've had to spend a lot of time kind of thinking about reporting capabilities, demonstrating value to your board or the people that are making the purchasing decisions. And that's different kinds of demonstrations of value. You need to show what types of threats, how you're investing in making it more efficient with things like response actions, for example, whereas the board, it's about how many cases have you looked at, how many detections, how many people are looking at this, how many eyes are actually on my estate. So we spent a lot of time thinking about not only the value ROI kind of justification when people are making a purchase decision, but the whole life cycle. And so, you show that you're demonstrating continuous value, you're investing continually in the service. And I think that helps people understand why outsourcing was a good decision and partnering with an MDR vendor was a good decision as well.
Okay. Well, so let's pull this back a little bit to the AI side of things. So I've had, obviously, it's been a couple of years now since, OpenAI launched ChatGPT, and, everyone went crazy with generative AI. We switched to agentic AI. We're talking about, general AI. So there's it's all AI all the time. And yeah. I've had multiple episodes of this podcast where we've talked about AI. From a security perspective, AI for basically replacing tier one in a SOC scenario, which honestly I think for tier one, I think a lot of that makes sense. Like your general tier one activities are sort of tedious, mundane. I'm just looking over logs and trying to identify anomalies that are worth further investigation. It's like that. That seems like a thing that AI is uniquely suited for. And when we look at the scale of threats, the scale of data, the scale of alerts, the breadth of the attack surface, you pretty much have to. Like I can't really imagine how you would do this without using AI on some level. Like even if it's not generative, agentic, or whatever. Even before OpenAI came along, we were already doing AI ML in security as like that's kind of the foundation of security is AI ML. What are your thoughts, given all that setup? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that relationship between technology and AI and human analysts, and and where do human analysts fit in terms of being able to kind of spot novel threats, spot lateral movement? How do we balance those things?
Yeah, it's a big topic. I think there's a few things here. So the most important thing for me running this MDR business is giving customers consistent outcomes. So the approach we've taken is, they're high quality outcomes, they're consistent, and we need to make sure that whatever type of automation, I'd like to say, as well as AI we're using, is all about maintaining or improving that level of service. That's the first risk that we needed to kind of get our heads around, is we don't want to be giving customers this response here and this response here, and it has to be very predictable. Now, that being said, we're a very high scale MDR business. We've got over 32,000 customers. We've got over 500 analysts, like human analysts today. And every customer needs to get the value, and that's back to my showing value through reporting and through actual humans in the loop very much. And our overall philosophy has been very similar to what you were just suggesting. So that tier one analyst, that is a lot about when you see certain types of detection, certain threats, certain cases, it's like quite a high percentage of that is very, very repeatable. So there are certain AI agents now in those processes and in the workflow, and that have already contributed to automation that existed way before agentic AI, to like do things like, first of all, the basics, deduplication, repetition of very simple tasks where humans actually make the most mistakes. And that's all about driving down case volume where it is low value and very, very simple. So that's where I think like we're moving in terms of volume in the tier one analyst space is all about reducing volume and reducing those heads doing that role and moving them into higher value spaces and into the tier two and tier three domain. Then you get to the tier two space, and what we're doing there is all about linking together what we've spoken about for the last couple of years, like bringing together better human context. And again, that's not so much agentic AI, but there are Gen AI use cases there, and where you bring better context, you help the human understand it more rapidly, you give them a set of decisions to make that are perhaps more not predetermined, but are definitely better informed, so they can make better decisions more rapidly. And then third, you have the tier three SOC analysts, where you're starting to see a lot more agentic use cases in there. And our end goal there is actually that we build the framework where the tier three analyst, can really decide, I want to automate this, I want to automate this, this should be an agentic use case. And you give them the framework. So you're not relying on engineering or specific AI development resources. They're focused on the framework to enable the analyst to be self-sufficient. And you end up with, a significant volume of use cases that are really driving huge efficiency in your operation. But like I said, the most important thing for Sophos is maintain value, drive efficiency for the customer, and make sure that you have predictable outcomes. If I actually rewind this discussion, like you said, a lot of security vendors have been using AI for years anyway, and that's no different to Sophos. It was like a core part of our endpoint to just make sure we're doing things like very proactive. You see a certain behavior, you have machine learning algorithms that spot that behavior, you can tune them up and down depending on your kind of risk tolerance, and you can put the endpoint into a shields up state. And that's all about containing the threat, which has been at the heart of security for many, many years. And to us and myself, it's the combination of proactive types of threat reduction as well as the detection and response use cases that make up our whole strategy and philosophy here. Okay. I've tried to answer that pretty succinctly, covered quite a lot.
No, I mean, it's good. I mean, like I said, it was interesting to me when generative AI came on the scene and everyone went crazy with AI, because I was like, okay, but we were already talking, like AI was already a buzzword in security.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we didn't jump on the marketing it straight away whatsoever. We were very much, we had our strategy, we wanted to prove it, and then we're going to market with this is enhancing and making what we were already doing more efficient, and then just basically sharing those use cases externally.
Yeah, I mean, and just, from my perspective, like that shift really was like the tooling or the foundation of security tools was already AI ML.
Yep.
All generative AI did for us in that regard was kind of democratize it, where like, okay, well, now I don't personally need to be a security expert per se. I mean, I am a CISSP, but someone doesn't have to be one to engage with the tools at this point, because when well, now I can just use a natural language question to be like, I don't know, what should I be looking for, and so it can help that in that way, whatever. But that actually, so kind of tying those things together, kind of bringing me to a different point, which is, do you feel like MDR is uniquely or only suited for small to medium organizations? Like, is there a reason that your Fortune 100 large enterprises or whatever wouldn't use MDR?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, there's definitely enterprises that should use MDR, and again, it comes down to security investment levels. Up at the very top size of organizations, they're probably going to have very tailored use cases. They're probably going to have like pretty detailed SIM use cases that are specific to their environment, specific to their regulation. They probably operate in a very specific way, and they probably have quite a significant security investment. So it's very hard to say without being more specific about the organization, but we're focused on those that want to either fully outsource it to Sophos or want to partner, where perhaps they perhaps they do have a SOC, but perhaps it doesn't cover 24/7, or perhaps they want to basically only focus on if there is an incident, and they want us to do all of the general detection response and improving the hygiene, improving the accuracy, but they do want a handover point. So there's many different models of MDR, everything from you're owning it fully, including the incident, like we do for a majority of our customers, through to collaboration and partnership. At the top of the Fortune 500, I think that's quite a different use case usually, where they are protecting against very specific types of threats and behavior, and they've already probably made a significant investment in technology and tools. It doesn't mean necessarily that MDR isn't for them, but it's a bigger leap for them, I think.
Yeah. Well, and part of the reason that I asked, and I'm going to go back to my Office 365 argument, when that came out, my first thought was, this is a no-brainer for small and medium companies, because they don't have an IT team to manage the Exchange server and the SharePoint server and the whatever. And cost benefit analysis, this is great. Every small and medium business should do this. That was my takeaway. And then I pretty much immediately right after that went, but also, why wouldn't General Motors or America, those are always my go-to large enterprises, General Motors and American Airlines. Why wouldn't a large enterprise want to do this as well? Because the cost benefit is kind of the same. It's just on a much larger scale. It's like you can still say, okay, well, I don't need to buy these servers. I don't need to manage these servers. I don't need to hire the personnel to do this stuff. I can just have a monthly operational expense on my balance sheet where I'm just paying for this service, and it just happens. It just gets done.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that's more of a collaboration model still, though. I think they're still going to have and want to retain certain security expertise and knowledge within their organization that's specific to how they operate and the industry they're in and the scale they're at. So, I would see MDR still got a value proposition there to help them scale, to help them reduce costs, and to bring security expertise from a trusted partner. But I would say that they're still going to want to have some level of in-house knowledge and expertise to supplement that, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Going back, let's bring this back to the state of ransomware report. One of the things it notes in the report, and I'll link to it when we publish this podcast, so people can look at it themselves. But one of the things it talks about is the human consequences of ransomware, whether that be, leadership replacement, staff burnout, loss of morale. Obviously, we look at it as it's a technical problem, and and it's a security problem, but it's also a people problem. Are there things that you think organizations can or should do proactively that might reduce that human toll?
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, that was a whole section in the report. Actually, it's probably the bit that resonated or kind of struck me the most is just how stressful these situations are, how they can be, a pivotal moment in somebody's career, just from levels of stress or anxiety, and if you put yourselves in their mindset, like dealing with that, it's all about how do we help people reduce the risk. That's easy to say. We're selling technology, we're selling tools, we're selling services, right? So let's assume somebody's done that, but how do you help prepare for that? So let's just say, unfortunately, you did have a vulnerability, it's been compromised. What's the first thing you do? How do you know, to prepare? How do you rehearse these things? Who are your trusted partners? Who are you going to call upon? So my biggest piece of feedback there is always prepare for the worst case scenario. Have a very trusted set of partners, vendors, and contacts that you're going to call upon. Role play the heck out of it. So put yourself in that war room. Make sure that your finance leader, your HR leader, everybody that's in the leadership of the company and organization understands what their role is to play, so that you are a team in that scenario, and push those relationships to the limit in a safe environment. And so just, you've got to treat it as seriously as possible. Make sure you're doing those things regularly. People change in organizations, you expect your supply chain changes, all kinds of different things change, and you've got to really appreciate all of those different risk levels. And if you unfortunately do experience that ransomware, and you've done that, at least you have some predictability. It reduces the level of anxiety, it reduces the stress, as we are all humans. And what you're going to do, hopefully, as best possible, and who you're going to call when you've done a 16-hour shift, or hopefully not. But, you've got to basically role play it as much as possible and prepare as best possible.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, once upon a time I was in the Air Force, we would do exercises every once in a while. And it's like, then the purpose would be, okay, well, if something happens, then now it becomes sort of muscle memory. Like if you do,
exactly.
You do the exercise enough, it becomes muscle memory to okay, this is how you respond.
Less shock.
But there are some things, like I literally just this morning, so my wife and I have had this fire safe for important documents for forever. It's this 75-pound box, locks and whatever. And so ostensibly, if my house burned down, my files would be safe in this fire safe. We just migrated that stuff to a much lighter weight, more of like a briefcasey style one that is supposedly fire and water safe, and much lighter. So I could just put the documents. And as I was doing it, I said to my wife, I'm like, okay, but short of actually burning the house down, there's no way for me to actually test this. I'm putting my faith in this, in the manufacturers of this device to say that, all right, well, I hope you guys did your homework, because I can't actually ever know if this is going to work until it happens. Yeah.
I mean, it's a good scenario. I think you have to work out how much can you invest for that scenario. Could you get a smaller safe and from the same manufacturer and test it? Could you get together with a group of people and do that kind of validation? That there are scenarios similar in instant response preparedness where what's your tolerance, what's your cost, what's your level of investment even in that activity? And I would just stress and encourage people to again, invest as much as possible in preparing and running the scenario as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, and I guess that is where reviewers with more resources than me, come into play. I've reviewed IOSafe drives over the years that are fireproof, waterproof, they used to do things at like Black Hat to do like these very sensationalist demos of their portable USB drive and how it was like, basically it could survive a shotgun blast and stuff, and they would actually shoot it and then prove that. Whereas like I'm not going to invest my money to buy one and then bring it home and shoot it because I don't want to find out the hard way that it doesn't work, and I also don't want to unnecessarily damage it if it does work. But yes, there are obviously people out there on YouTube or whatever who do have the resources and will do those things, so that you can just go watch it and be like, all right, they lit theirs on fire and their documents seem to survive, so fingers crossed.
Well, yes, I mean, it's similar, isn't it? Sophos has this as well. We have advisory services where people live and breathe this day in, day out, and can come on site or can do it remotely and kind of give you like documentation, enablement, training. They can make you, as like the person that's thinking about security in the organization, understand and put yourselves as if the incident was happening. The point, though, I'd still stress is, though, that it's not just good enough having that person who cares about security thinking about it. It's got to be the other people in the organization in whatever role they're in, because it's going to be a team game if you're in that situation and your organization's at risk of not operating. It's going to be everybody in every role that needs to get some kind of exposure and put themselves in that mindset. Because, again, you see from the report, it's not just one or two people that are affected. It's the whole organization, and it can be every single role. From if it was a school, the kids can be just as affected, and that's not practical to bring them all in, but it's literally everybody has some kind of level of mental impact taken away from these events, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and ransomware also, and this is somewhat dated, but I mean, ransomware did evolve from a simple exploit that encrypted stuff that, and like initially, and as far as I know, initially it was more of a consumer targeted. It was just kind of an evolution of your standard malware. And you'd have people getting like ransomware. It would encrypt their computer and ask for reasonable ransom. So, it might be $300, it might be $500, but there were things that were like a stretch for people, but like it was an affordable thing. And then it kind of moved to, hey, if we do this with companies, we can ask for 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures. We can get much bigger paydays out of this. But it still went from, well, I'm going to encrypt your data. And then everyone said, well, you need to back up your data, make sure you've got regular backups so you can restore, and you can, tell the ransomware people to go jump in a lake. And then it became double extortion of, okay, well, now I've got your data, and if you don't pay the ransom, I'm gonna sell it, or I'm gonna leak it, or whatever. So now you've got, no matter how good your backups are, you still have incentive to pay the ransom, because there are still negative consequences possible. And then, in recent years, there have been ransomware actors who have skipped the encryption part altogether and just gone to the extortion, the data exfiltration extortion part of it, because it's like, all right, well, I don't have to actually go through the process of encrypting your data. I can just say that I've got your data, and I'm going to leak it or sell it if you don't pay this ransom. I can do the extortion without the encryption. All of those things are challenges, and a lot of it is like, it is kind of difficult, to fully defend against. What advice do you have? What practical steps would you suggest that companies should be doing today to adequately defend against that?
Yeah, so I think, like we spoke about right at the beginning, like what's the way people are getting access? They're still exploiting vulnerabilities. They're still, the basics of hygiene. So it's very important to understand both your external exposure and your internal exposure, and either make sure you, your partner, or a vendor like Sophos is regularly reviewing that and, patching and keeping your environments up to date. And we still see customers that use legacy operating systems, and that's always something we're like trying to rapidly drive people away from. Make sure your operating system is the most latest version you can. Make sure it's patched. Just get the basic hygiene right, and then invest in your detection and response as well, and partner with MDR, and just have people and vendors that are responsible for it, that live and breathe it, like we've been speaking about for the last few minutes. The other elements, it's around backup and recovery. It's really important. Like we've recently launched, a partnership with Rubrik in that space, and it's really important that you have a very strong backup and recovery strategy as well, so that you can get your data in as many scenarios as possible. And then finally, I would just say that if you get to the worst case scenario where you're negotiating, I would strongly recommend bringing in people that are trained to do that as well. There's no guaranteed outcomes in those scenarios, and unfortunately, you can negotiate and you could still end up with your data out there, or not getting it back. So yeah, I think you just got to prepare again. Like, to summarize this whole conversation, you've got to get the basics of security hygiene right, work with partners and vendors like Sophos that live and breathe security, make sure that you're preparing with your organization for the worst case scenario as much as you can afford to do. And then, making sure that you have that incident plan in place, so that if you do need to negotiate, if it gets to worst case scenario, that you're there with people that do that for a living as well, to minimize the financial impact and get back running as quickly as possible.
Yeah. One of the things that's always occurred to me is that when it comes to the data exfiltration part, there is zero way to ever definitively prove the attacker no longer has your data. Like, if you pay the ransom, no matter how you do it, you don't know if they've maintained another copy. I mean, it's digital. They could have 1,000 copies. They could have already sent it wherever. So there's no way for you to prove it, other than monitoring the dark web forever to see, does it show up? It hasn't been sold. The only sort of solace I can find in there is to say that there has to be some level of honor among thieves, so to speak, or the business model fails. Because if people are paying the ransom, and then you find out a month later that the data was sold or leaked anyway, then you take away the incentive to pay the ransom. I used to say that very early on, when people would say, well, should I pay the ransom? And there's all kinds of debates about shouldn't I pay the ransom? But I would always maintain, if you pay the ransom, the threat actor should follow through on helping you decrypt the data, because if they don't, nobody else will pay the ransom. The business model only works as long as you feel like you're going to get the result if you pay the ransom.
Yeah, I mean, I get the point. I'm still not sure, though. We see every type of behavior out there. We see, customers just, out in the wild paying ransom, and their data does still get leaked. We see, data not decrypted. When we see the opposite, we see where, the data isn't released. So it's very hard to second guess that. Right. And when I was at Cyber Reason, we did studies, and we found that organizations that paid the ransom, it was something like only like around half of them, maybe 55-60%, were actually able to decrypt their data. Like the decryption tools are generally shoddy. They don't. They're much better in encrypting than decrypting. Yeah, less reliable. Yeah. So a lot of times, even when you pay the ransom, you're not able to decrypt all of your data successfully. And also, what we found was that a lot of times, very often, organizations that paid the ransom got hit a second time, often by the same threat actors. They were like, all right, well, we're going to do it again. Because we know you haven't had time to actually solve, fix the holes that we used to get in the first time. We know that you are willing to pay the ransom, so we'll just hit you again. So it's like, so I get it. Yes, that's not exactly the most honorable thing, but I'm just saying, I think that if it for me, the logic would come down to, if I pay this ransom, do I get the result? It's like, if we're talking about just an old school, kidnapping, ransom negotiation thing. It's like, well, I'm going to pay the ransom in exchange for you giving me my loved one back. Yeah. If I'm not going to get my loved one back, then I'm not going to pay the ransom. That's the model breaks down. Yeah, well, yeah, unfortunately, that is a true story as well, but happening in both ways. But yeah, I still think, like you'll see from reading the paper, there's all kinds of different outcomes. It's still a very grey area. I've got personal opinions about whether people should pay ransomware or not, but at the end of the day, the organization has to make the right decision based on the risk for them and what state is their data in, what have they backed it up, couldn't they get back operational rapidly? We see, again, all different kinds of scenarios. We see those that are still under ransom that are able to get back up and running rapidly, but want to, pay it so that the data doesn't get released, hopefully. And we see the others where they, completely stopped in terms of being able to operate. So it's still a very diverse set of scenarios, and every organization has to make the right decision for them at the time. It's a difficult one to theorize on without being in that specific scenario. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I know that, we always said, and the FBI has said, and everyone has said, well, don't pay the ransom. It's like, okay, well, it's don't pay the ransom with this asterisk.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Of, well, if you're a hospital and people are going to die, maybe pay the ransom. If your company is literally going to cease to exist if you don't pay the ransom, maybe pay the ransom. It's like there are definitely conditions on that statement.
Yeah, and that can happen very quickly, for a smaller business that's, living hand to mouth a little bit. So yeah, it's a real world scenario, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we're kind of winding down at the end here, but let me just kind of open the floor to you, sort of, and say, what's next for you? What's next for Sophos? What do you see on the kind of the horizon of security?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked a lot today about, the basics of security hygiene and like the breadth of the offerings that we have. But I think the way that we're starting to think more and more is how do we continue to reduce risk up front? And I've heard people starting to use the term preemptive security more and more again. But the way we're thinking about it is how do we start to think about building more of that security leadership? That stat I shared earlier, how do we all that security leadership into the platform itself? So how do we enable MSPs maybe working with customers to deliver more security strategy for their customer? How do we help them reduce risk even more? And that could be building more compliance and regulatory capabilities into the security ecosystem. So you're basically saying, how do you help companies with like NIST and frameworks like that think about it and get more rapid understanding why that's important for their business, and then combining that with things like vulnerabilities and exposure and business risk, and building that into more of in the forefront of how they interact from a security perspective. So if I'm a small business, I actually understand how investing in X is going to help me reduce my overall risk. And what does that do? That helps reduce the risk upstream as well of threats overall. So yeah, we're starting to think about building CISO expertise into Sophos Central more and more over the coming years. And like I said, that's going to be just bringing everything we've talked about, plus regulation, plus just the overall view on risk reduction and cost into the central solution. And then if I was to think of a headline of what does that mean, it'd be the kind of democratization of the CISO, really. How do we build that expertise and knowledge into Sophos Central platform and enable partners to deliver that for the end customer more and more?
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time. It was a fun conversation.
Yeah, very good. Good conversation, Tony. Thanks for the time.
All right. Thank you.